It appears as though our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has grown himself a bit of a beard. Some say it's to create a new look, maybe a little more powerful, while others say it's just to keep his face a little bit warmer during the cold Ottawa winter months. Well, Mr. Trudeau wasn't that cold recently as he spent a little bit of time in Costa Rica on vacation. Joining me now to talk a bit about it is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me from Toronto. Now, Brian, during the federal election, Andrew Scheer was giving Mr. Trudeau a rough time about his large carbon footprint using what? Two campaign jets, while Mr. Trudeau booked many, many recent flights during his recent holiday.
He did. Now, just on the beard thing, I'm not going to bust his chops too much over growing a beard because I'm a big fan of the vacation beard, Hal. I'm not a fan of the playoff beard. They get wild, they get unruly, but I like a good vacation beard. You take time off, you stop shaving, and that's what I think Justin Trudeau has. What is perplexing to me are all the stories by major media outlets. What does Justin Trudeau's beard mean? What's this signaling? It signals that he didn't want to shave while he was on vacation, and now he thinks, hey, I look pretty snazzy. Lots of guys do that, and eventually, their wives, their other halves will eventually say, that scratchy thing, it's got to go. He should do that with his planes, though. Look, he was down in Costa Rica, and okay, fine. He goes on a vacation to Costa Rica. That's not the issue. The issue is that the man that has declared a climate emergency, that we've all got to reduce our carbon footprint, is out there having two jets go back and forth. He didn't just take two jets to Costa Rica. In fact, he took one, but then it went back and another one went down. And at one point, the two of them were passing each other in the sky, uh, which is all very bizarre. I've never seen this before. I've been covering politics a long time. I went back, I looked at his trips to the Aga Khan's Island. That didn't happen. I looked at the trip to St. Kitts that he did, his first Christmas in office. That didn't happen. So I asked his office, I said, what's going on? Is he going back and forth? You might remember he took a quick trip with the family down to Florida during March break, I think it was last year, and had to fly back quickly. There was an emergency. He had to come back to Ottawa. It was just him. He flew back, went back to Florida the next day. No problem. We all understand that can happen. But what was with the two planes? And all they would say is it's just standard operating procedure for the Canadian Forces and the RCMP. No, it's not. We have no previous records of this going back to Paul Martin's vacation in Libya. So they've got to give a few more answers on this. And by the way, it's not like they needed the plane sitting there to rush the prime minister out if there was a security problem. Once he got there, he got on a commercial charter plane, which is smaller than the Challenger he flew down on, to go to a more remote island, remote area with a smaller airport and runway that the Challenger couldn't land at. So it's not like they needed to be sitting there. It's all very strange, all very bizarre, and it brings back the two campaign planes.
And at least he also came back with a very nice beard. Brian, unfortunately, gang crime and shootings are up in many of our country's largest cities, including Toronto and Calgary. Police chiefs say our Prime Minister is taking the wrong approach when it comes to gun violence.
Yeah, that's right. So I looked at the stats. Calgary, the latest stats I have are for the end of November. I don't have end of year yet. And they were up at 83 shootings. That's up from 71 last year. Up from 47 last year and a multi-year average of 71. So, you've still got the month of December. There's going to be some shootings. That number is going to be much higher. In Toronto, a 13% increase, 484 shootings by the end of the year. In Ottawa, similar numbers to Calgary, in the 70s, down a couple from last year, but up over their multi-year average. So this is a problem going on across the country. And whether you talk to Calgary Police Chief Mark Neufeld, who said, look, this is about gangs and drugs, or you talk to Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders, who said, this is about fentanyl, this is about gangs protecting their stash, they're saying what the real problem is, and the federal government is going after law-abiding gun owners. They're going to do their $600 million buyback program to buy back not handguns, but rifles. And then they say they'll pass a law that will allow municipalities to ban handguns if they want. But a lot of provinces, including Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, have all said they don't want to do it. So they're focusing on law-abiding gun owners. Meanwhile, the gangsters still have the guns, and they're spending half the amount on the border and guns and gangs as they are on buying back guns from law-abiding gun owners. It's all very strange, Hal.
Brian, many Iranians are celebrating the death of former Iranian general and known terrorist Qasem Soleimani, but there were others, not just in Iran, but here in Canada, who've been mourning his death.
Yeah, there were people actually mourning. Now, there were also elected officials from the Ontario New Democratic Party who were out at a rally. They describe it as a peace rally. They say I got it all wrong. But I have to say, why are you out at a rally with flags of paramilitary or terrorist groups flying overhead, chanting and singing, when this rally is really only there because a terrorist was killed? Soleimani was the leader of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard of Iran. That's an organization that Canada, including under liberal governments, the United States, the United Nations, they've all declared this a terrorist organization. And Soleimani's job as the leader of that organization was not to do anything in Iran, but to go to Yemen and support violent groups there. The awful civil war in Yemen has been part of what Soleimani's been up to. He has been funding and supporting paramilitary groups, some of whom had their flags flying at this rally with the elected officials in Iraq, funding in Hezbollah, the Taliban. You go down the list. This is an organization that has caused all kinds of death and destruction and continues to push it. His death should actually not be mourned by anyone at all that loves freedom, that loves the ability of individuals to live peaceful lives. He was anything but a peaceful individual himself.
Brian, the Canadian military is temporarily relocating some soldiers from Iraq to Kuwait. Chief of Defense Staff General Jonathan Vance announced the move recently on Twitter. And Brian, Canada is following the lead of other countries like Germany, ensuring the safety of our troops.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I get this. They're in a war zone, and we're moving them because one of the countries in the region that wants to continue to perpetuate the violence is upset that our ally killed their terrorist in chief. So we're moving. We've got about 500 troops currently in Iraq. They haven't said exactly how many. It'll be at least 200 moving, following the lead of Germany and others. We're essentially saying, oh, the Americans killed this awful man. Let us move over here and pretend that we don't know them and give Iran a win. Iran is a bad actor in the region. Iran is a country with blood on its hands, whether we're talking about in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, they have blood on their hands. They are the perpetuators of much of this violence. So why we're giving them a win is beyond me, and it's not a move that I would have made nor advised anyone to make.
The federal Conservatives will be choosing a new leader coming up on June 27th. Who are some of the leading candidates so far to replace Andrew Scheer?
Well, the only official candidate is a guy that you've never heard of, a guy last active when Kim Campbell was leader of the Progressive Conservative Party. And I'm not sure I'll get his name right because I keep getting it wrong. Brian Brutleg, I believe it is. But if I've got it wrong, it doesn't matter because he's not going to get any votes. He has zero profile. Pierre Poilievre is jumping into the race. So is Aaron O'Toole. I ran into Peter MacKay on the street the other day. He is not officially in the race, but everybody I talked to, Peter's being very coy about whether he's in the race, but he's going to be jumping in. And Jean Charest, an awful lot of the Mulroney machinery and some big name organizers getting behind Jean Charest, which I was laughing at a week ago, saying this is ridiculous. He'd be a tourist in the party he used to lead. Remember, he was the leader of the PC party after that disastrous Kim Campbell debacle. He was recruited to go and lead up the Federalist cause after the referendum in Quebec in '95. He became leader of the Quebec Liberal Party because in Quebec at that point you only had liberals or separatists, and all the Federalists went into the Liberal camp. But while he was premier, Hal, I covered Jean Charest as an opposition leader and as premier. And I like the man very much. He's very affable. He's very thoughtful. He knows his files. But he ran the most state interventionist government in the continent. And now he wants to become the federal conservative leader again. If he can show me where, while he was premier of Quebec, he was doing things that conservatives would normally do, I'll give him all the credit in the world because, as I said, thoughtful, knowledgeable man, but it's a bit bizarre. If the Mulroney gang's behind him, he's got to be serious, though.
What about former Harper cabinet minister, former health minister Rona Ambrose?
All indications is that while she's enjoying the spotlight, that she won't jump in. I hear different things. That's the latest. Check back tomorrow, we could find out that she's actually in. It's that fluid right now.
A new report says when we call the Canada Revenue Agency, the wait times are even longer than we're used to. And sometimes, Brian, we're receiving unreliable answers. Tell me more about that.
This was an audit conducted by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and they made about 200 calls last year and tried to see, okay, how long does it take? Are they meeting their service standards for business members that need to know? Am I following the rules? Am I applying the tax properly? Am I deducting the tax properly? Am I collecting it properly? These are important questions. The government should want to answer these questions. They rely on businesses to collect and remit an awful lot of their taxes. 15 minutes was the average time waiting, and that's down. That's a good sign. The longest call that they recorded was 40 minutes, and that person just eventually hung up. But to get to a senior agent, a senior advisor, if there's a problem, it's an hour of sitting just waiting on the phone. Yeah, and then 40% of the time, you're not going to get complete or fully accurate information. All of that has to be deeply concerning to the Canada Revenue Agency and the government as a whole, because if you do a filing based on bad information, it's going to come back on you eventually. It's going to come back on the business owner, on the taxpayer. They need to be providing better service.
That just goes to show you even more that the scam text that we're getting on our phones from the CRA obviously is a scam, because if you got to wait almost an hour to get to somebody, that ain't right. New information from Public Safety Canada says the average bill for disaster assistance was $430 million over the last 3 years. Brian, Ottawa is having to deal with a lot of natural disasters, including flooding, fires, and hail damage.
So hail damage is a regular occurrence that goes on. Forest fires, to a degree, are regular occurrences, and we have them straight across the country. We all think of the big Fort Mac fire several years ago now, and that was a massive fire in 2016. But every year across the northern portion of this country, in every province, there are forest fires. But in certain areas, it's gone up, and of course, the flooding. The damage, part of the reason that the dollar amount is going up is the same reason that it goes up for insurance companies. It costs more to replace the home that you maybe built 30 years ago. And we've had, in particular, in Eastern Canada, we had the two big floods in Ottawa. And in 2017, it was mostly in the Ottawa area. In 2019, it was the Ottawa area. It was along Lake Ontario. The water levels were rising high. It was down into Montreal and straight along the St. Lawrence. So it was a much bigger region that got hit this year. So hopefully that bill is going to go down next year, but you never know.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle spent their Christmas holiday here in Canada, the Great White North, this year, and they wanted to thank Canadians for our wonderful hospitality. Brian?
They were able to get out and enjoy nature. Of course, you saw the picture of Prince Harry holding his son in front of a lake. They were able to visit Toronto, see friends and family here. Meghan Markle lived, of course, in Toronto for 7 years and has a lot of family. They actually spent much more time out west than I was expecting. I was expecting them to be hiding out at the Ben and Jessica Mulrooney house, because they're very close friends of Meghan Markle. I thought they'd just hole up there in a Tony Toronto neighborhood and not go outside for 6 weeks, but they really truly did get to enjoy Canada. And of course, there's been speculation, Hal, that they could actually move here, because they're so far down the line in terms of being able to take the throne that maybe they decamp to Canada. A bit of a quieter life here than they have in Britain, where they have to deal with a paparazzi-style media that we simply don't have at this point in this country.
A little more elbow room in the world's second largest country, geographically speaking, right here in Canada, you bet. And they'll have to become hockey fans. We'll have to teach them a little bit on that, and to enjoy a good solid Timbit. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.